Hello friends, this video on chemical effects of current part 11 is brought to you by examfear.com. No more fear from exam cases. Now let us try to see how exactly the process of electroplating takes place. How exactly we provide a coating of one metal over another metal. So let us take the same setup where we have two electrodes. In this case, we have taken both the electrodes made up of copper. So both of them are made up of copper, and the electrolyte which is used here is copper sulfate. That is CuSO4, that is copper sulfate, and both the plates are made up of copper, and this is connected to a battery. Right now, when you dip the electrodes into the copper sulfate solution, the circuit gets completed because copper sulfate is a good conductor. So current will start flowing through the copper sulfate solution. Now, as the circuit is completed, current flows. Now, we have to allow the current to flow for quite some time. Now, before also in the potato experiment, we saw that, right? The greenish spot appeared only after a couple of minutes because the reaction which takes place in the solution, that will also take some time to show its effects. So, just dip the electrodes into the solution and allow the current to flow for quite some time, around 15 to 20 minutes. After that, remove the electrodes. So take the electrodes out of copper sulfate solution. And what do you observe? The observation is that copper gets deposited on the electrode which is connected to the negative terminal of the battery. So this is the negative terminal of battery. This is the positive terminal of battery. So on this electrode, we see that copper gets deposited. So it was just a copper plate. On top of that, more copper has got deposited on this electrode. So what do you learn from this? We learn that using such a setup, what we can do is one metal can be made to deposit on the other metal. Now here we have taken both as copper plates. Now instead of copper, if you would have taken say a carbon rod here, so in that case copper would have deposited on the carbon rod. So basically you are getting a coating of copper over carbon. Similarly, if you want a coating of copper over some other metal, just instead of this copper plate, you put that particular metal. So at the end of this process, you will get a layer of copper on this plate. So this is how we can do electroplating. Now the question is, how exactly copper is getting deposited on this plate? From where is this copper coming? Now let us try to understand the process. Now when electric current passes through this solution, now as soon as these electrodes are dipped into the solution, the circuit gets completed. Now electric current passes through copper sulfate solution. Now when electric current passes through it, this copper sulfate, it dissociates, that is, it breaks into the respective ions. And what are the respective ions? Copper ions and sulfate ions. So as you can see, copper ions are positively charged and sulfate ions are negatively charged, right? So these copper ions, being positively charged, they tend to move towards the negative electrode. Which is the negative electrode? This is the negative electrode and this is the positive electrode. So these copper ions will tend to move towards the negative electrode. So these copper ions will start to deposit on the negative electrode. So what will happen then? So copper is getting deposited on this electrode. But at the same time, this copper sulfate solution is losing the copper ions. So the copper sulfate solution also needs copper ions. So from where is the copper ion coming? That copper ion is coming from the positive electrode. So what is happening at the positive electrode? From the positive electrode, the copper, so this electrode is also made up of copper. So the copper becomes copper ions by losing two electrons, and these copper ions from the positive electrode comes into the copper sulfate solution. So basically what is happening is, from the copper sulfate solution, the copper ions are going into the negative electrode and copper ions are coming from the positive electrode, and that is how the copper sulfate solution is being balanced. So basically copper sulfate solution is always there, just that copper ions are going from solution to negative electrode and copper ions are coming from positive electrode to the copper sulfate solution. So if you look at the overall process, the net result is that copper ions are being transferred from the positive electrode to the negative electrode. through the solution. So that is what is happening. Net process, if you see, copper ions are being transferred from positive electrode to negative electrode. So now let us suppose that you have to do an electroplating. So say this is copper plate. So whichever metal you want to put a coating, like suppose you want to put a coating of zinc on iron. So in that case, you should keep iron on the negative. Iron should be the negative electrode and zinc should be the positive electrode. Because from positive electrode, zinc will come out and it will go to the negative electrode. And that is how you will get a zinc coating. So wherever on whichever metal's coating you want to give, that metal should be the positive plate, and on which metal you want to give the coating, that metal should be the negative plate. For example, instead of copper plate, this could be a carbon rod. So if this is a carbon rod, what will happen at the end of the process? There will be a plating of copper on the carbon rod. So that would be the net result. So basically, in the process of electroplating, what happens is the metal which is on the positive plate, that will go and get deposited on the negative plate. That is the net result. So you have to remember that, and accordingly you have to decide that which metal should form the positive electrode and which metal should form the negative electrode. So I hope you would have understood the process of electroplating and you saw how advantageous it could be in a lot of things. Thank you. Please visit www.examfear.com to watch more educational videos with a better experience. Please do not forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel for latest updates. Thank you once again.